In last video, we deployed this solution. In this solution, we're going to be talking about new keyword and its execution context. And before going for that, I want to show you something. When we create an object, there is a property in it that is called prototype. Do not confuse it with proto underscore. That is different. Let's create an object const or let's just console this func store. Okay, console.log func store. You can see there are two functions that are stored inside of this func store. So I'm gonna print out this func store, which is an object and it contains two functions. And let's see what happens. And just let's comment out this user one. And okay, so this has two functions, increment and login. When I expand this increment function, you can see a property called prototype, which is an object. Okay, if I hover over this, you can see showing off that it is an object. Okay, so functions, so we can know that functions can behave as an objects and functions can behave as functions as well. Functions are called first class objects in JavaScript, and to use the if I call that object bit, to use the object or add the object properties to a function, we use this prototype. Okay, you can see this, and when I expand this, it has all of that functionality you call, and it has proto as well, to which is used to link to other objects. Okay, and so now you know that every function can behave as function and every function can behave as objects. If I go to my official documentation of um, functions objects, official documentation of JavaScript. In JavaScript, functions are first class objects because they can have properties and methods just like any other object. We can add properties and methods to the function by using the property called prototype, and we will see this in a bit. And let's move on. So in this solution that we wrote in our last lecture, we used object.create to link to this object which has these functions. So what if we have hundreds of objects? We may have other objects as well that might be linked to this user creator as well. So instead of like, there might be another object that is associated with let's say func store 1, because in our real application you would have a lot of objects. Okay, so then to link this func store 1, we'll have to like write this line of code again and then type in func store 1. So what we are doing is again manually hand bonding, manually handcrafting, or manually linking to the objects. So we'll have to think of a solution that automates this process, and this process can be automated by a keyword called new in JavaScript. Okay, so what does new keyword does is when we call it with a new, what it does is it does two things. It creates a new object and it returns the new object. So it is doing lines of code for us. So we already know that by using the new keyword, the new object is automatically created. So we don't need like this now, const object on a runtime or whatever. So the new keyword is doing this for us. Okay, so we can remove this line of code, and we know that new keyword also returns the new object, so we don't need this line of code as well. Okay, so now if we don't have even a new user object, so we do not have to write it new user as well. We have to write it this dot name and this dot score. And now you might have a question that you are using this inside of a function. I'm not referring to the function. I'm not referring to the current function of user creator with this. I'm using, whenever you see a dot notation, I'm using the object bit of a function. Okay, so this dot name means I'm referring to the current object of this function. We know that when every function has a property called prototype. So okay, if you it might be a little complex, but you have to understand. Now I'm using the object bit of that, and because prototype is an object, and I can use it in my function. I'm not referring it to the function part of user creator. I'm referring to the object part of the user creator. And instead of now using this, because we have to in this way we have to link out our code. So what we are gonna be doing is using the prototype property and write these increment and login function. So I'm gonna say that user creator dot prototype, which is an object, and now I can add properties to it. I'm gonna add a function to this, and which is called increment, and this is gonna be a function, and I'm gonna say that this dot score to be plus plus, and I'm gonna create another function of login, user creator dot prototype dot login is equal to function. I'm gonna say that you are logged in. Okay, and now you can see that we have got rid of a bunch of lines of code. The by using the new keyword, it is automatically creating an object, returning an object. We don't have to do that, and we don't have to manually link by using. And now we are using the prototype to make the increment and login function. So you might have a question. We have write the increment function using the prototype, but how when on calling user one dot increment, how is it linking to this increment? Again, we saw earlier that it has a property of proto as well. Prototype has a property of proto. It is used to link to these functions as before as before we saw in our last video. So increment and login function are referred or linked through proto property of this user creator function, if that makes sense. So you do not mix it with proto. Prototype is an object which has a property proto, which is used to link increment and login function of this user creator with this user creator, if that makes sense. Whenever I create a user one or a instance of an object, it has increment and login function through what proto property. It's linking to increment and login through proto property, and prototype is itself an object where we can add object properties. And let's run our code to see if that is working or not. I'm gonna test it on user one. I'm gonna call it I'm gonna pass in 4 and I'm gonna increment it. I'm gonna then print it again to check if our score increases or not. So now our name is Phil and score is 5. The score has increased. You can see that it has a property of object as well. Okay, and which has two functions, which is linking to two functions, increment and login. And it is a proto constructor with a user creator name and score. And one more thing, when we are using the new keyword, we have to write in the function name with the first letter in capital. Okay, so this would be U, this would be U, this would be U as well, and this would be U as well. It doesn't do anything different or behind the scenes, but it's just a common understanding between the developers that you are using the new keyword. So let's say you have wrote this code and I'm reading this code. So when I see that the first letter is capitalized of a function, I will straightly forward know that you have used new keyword with it, because it's just a general understanding between developers that the first letter is capitalized when the new keyword is used. So it doesn't do anything special, but it's just an understanding. I hope that makes sense. In our next video, we are gonna dive deep into the this keyword also,